Hi, I'm John Sutherland for North Mountain Cardio. You've probably heard people use the expression fat cat. Well, today I want to talk about fat rats, and also skinny rats and in-between rats. Laboratory rats are the animal we use when we want to study metabolism or appetite or eating behavior. Humans and rats share about 90% of the same genes. They're not identical, but humans and rats seem to have inherited about 90% of their genes from a common ancestor. So rats are really a fairly good animal to study if you want to study metabolism. Also, unlike humans, rats do not respond to and are not barraged by ads at this time of year about joining a weight loss program or buying gym memberships or exercise equipment or special supplements to make up for the splurge of the holidays. In fact, as far as we know, rats don't even pay much attention to the calendar and holidays. In the study I'm about to show you, female rats were allowed to eat as much or as little as they want in a controlled, protected environment. So what we see in their behavior should reflect the genetically pre-programmed plan controlling appetite and eating behavior. And I think the results are pretty interesting.
So let's take a look at the results of a study from the University of Georgia. In the data that I'm going to show you, the upper graph maps the rat's body weight over time, while the lower graph maps their food intake. For the first 2 weeks of the experiment, the rats were allowed to eat as much as they wanted. Then their food allotment was reduced to 40% of what they'd been eating previously. Not surprisingly, the rats lost weight. After 2 weeks, the rats were again given free access to food without restrictions. They made up for their period of deprivation by increasing their food intake initially. Then, over time, their intake returned to normal. As their food intake increased, so did their weight, and in fact by the end of the experiment, they weighed more than they had at the beginning. A second group of rats also was allowed to eat spontaneously for a week. Then for the next 20 days, the rats were tube-fed more than 1.5 times their usual food intake. Of course, the result of all this extra food was weight gain. When the tube feedings were discontinued and these rats were again allowed to eat spontaneously, they actually ate less than they had originally, and they lost weight. But by the end of the experiment, they also weighed more than they had at the beginning. A third group of rats was simply allowed to eat spontaneously throughout the entire time. Their change in weight is shown in red, along with the weight changes of the underfed and the overfed rats. The interesting thing, I think, is that the final weights of all three groups of rats basically converged. The food intake and metabolic rate of the underfed and the overfed rats adjusted themselves such that, at the end of the 10 weeks, they resembled the group that had had free access to food all along. We are left with the impression that rats have a pre-programmed weight trajectory, along with compensatory mechanisms that are designed to get them back on track when external contingencies intervene.
These data seem to show that the animals had a built-in weight trajectory. And this research has been duplicated in other species. It seems that most animals have controls over appetite and metabolism such that their weight tends to follow a normal curve and flatten out as they mature. Human beings, on the other hand, don't seem to follow this same curve. We, if anything, tend to grow bigger, or particularly around the middle, as we age. Also, in any animal species, some individuals will be larger and some smaller than the average. But encountering truly obese animals is very rare. That's usually the result of some odd genetic abnormality or human intervention, as was the case here in these studies. Human beings alone seem to be the only member of the animal kingdom who can eat themselves into massive obesity without any internal controls stopping us, even if it is to our own detriment and impairs our health. The question then becomes, how did we manage to be able to do this? It's an interesting one, and one that we're going to try to answer in subsequent entries into our video blog and our postings on our blog at our website at North Mountain Cardio. I'm John Sutherland. Thanks for watching.